All right. Good morning and welcome to Expert Interview Tuesday. I have here with me Jeremy Price, who is a lawyer. He's an estate planning lawyer who actually got started back in the military. He was in the Air Force, where he was actually a part of the JAG Council and was working with the military men and women, came out of that and decided to focus on estate planning. So I have him here today just to talk a little bit about what is estate planning, who needs an estate plan in place, and how is that all put together. And so, Jeremy, thank you so much for being here with me, and I want to welcome you.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks, Charlene, for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I know you and I have talked at different points along the way, and I think that at least a little bit of what got you started to specialize in estate planning was some of the things you were seeing with some of the military men and women and not necessarily having estate plans in place and just, some other experience around there. Is there some things you want to share that relate to that experience?
No, so I mean, when I was in the military, it was something that we talked about, and that kind of the commands talked about and ultimately encouraged because of the nature of the military and kind of what we've been dealing with in the last little bit, and so it's definitely a need for kind of a very wide range of people, and that sometimes can be overlooked. But it's best to have something in place, some type of thing. So ultimately, people can decide how they want it done, and hopefully that helps things go smoother. If something bad were to happen.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, I want to thank you first off for your service as well. It's, the men and women who serve our country in the military that give us the opportunity to have the freedom that we are so lucky to have. And so thank you for giving up that part of your life and serving our country as well.
No, you're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I want to take a step back and talk about what is an estate plan, and so that we can get some of the terms out there that everyone can understand the foundation. I have a lot of folks who may not even know when you say estate planning, what does that really mean? And so if you want to take us back to some of the real basics of what is an estate plan.
Yeah. So when people hear estate planning, I think a lot of people don't really understand, and a lot of people are more familiar with the terms wills and trusts, and that's ultimately part of an estate plan, but not necessarily the whole of it. I mean, you can look at an estate as basically all the things that you own, whether it's from your shoes to your house, the stocks in your brokerage account, all those things, and as well as life insurance and retirement accounts, those things that you might not necessarily have great access to right now, but that if something were to happen to you, then your beneficiaries or heirs would be able to benefit from those things. And so an estate plan basically covers what's going to happen to those assets. Kind of that's the number one thing is, if you pass away, then where are those things going? What's going to happen? And that's kind of what I think most people think of, needing a will. If I die, I want to be able to make sure it goes to my kids or to my brothers or to somewhere. But there's also another aspect of estate planning that a lot of people don't necessarily think about, is in terms of incapacity planning. And basically that if something were to happen to an individual and they don't necessarily pass away, but they're injured and disabled, unable to make decisions on their own. And you see it basically kind of a lot more often with the elderly recently, and that just a growing population of people that have dementia or Alzheimer's. But then you also have the individuals that might have, traumatic brain injury or stroke, or, that significantly reduce their capacity. And you can put things in place for people to make decisions for you if you're not able to make those decisions yourself. And so that way it can provide a kind of a smooth means and things that can be put in place so that the decisions can continue to be made, bills can continue to be paid from your accounts, and it can be easier on everyone involved.
And so as you're talking about that, I know you touched on the wills a little bit and kind of that, how the will is used as far as kind of dictating where things go. But maybe you could talk just a little bit about a trust as well, and how does that fit into the whole picture?
Yeah, and so for traditionally, it's the wills that have, when you watch the movies, they talk about the wills, and that's kind of the traditional. But over the last 40, 50 years, basically the trusts have become a lot more popular, particularly in certain, some states are more popular than others, depending on what the process is for dealing with the probate proceedings, but also depending on kind of how much money the person has and ultimately what they want to do with their assets. So you can have a living trust, which is something that you can put assets into, and it's going to control those assets. That the trust is going to control those assets while you're alive as well as after you pass away. And so you can put in there kind of how you want those assets to be managed and controlled, and who the beneficiaries are. And it's a way that you can say that, yeah, I want it all to go to my kids, but I don't want them to necessarily have their fingers in it completely, so that there's certain restrictions, so that way they can't spend it all in one year and be done with it and say, is there any more? But that they can kind of string it along a little bit so it lasts longer, and that, or you basically put, they're going to be able to get it all distributed at a particular age, or so many years after, the parents pass away. A whole host of different possibilities in regards to dealing with the trust, but it allows you to kind of have a little bit more control after you pass away, instead of just saying, I'm going to give, that person, $100,000, here it is, put it in your bank account. And it's particularly important for those that are minors, because a minor can't hold assets in their own name, particularly large amounts, and so they need someone to be responsible for that. So you can put it into a trust, or the other option is to get a guardianship of the estate. Other states might call it a conservatorship, but ultimately it's the same as where somebody is appointed to manage the assets for a minor. And then the other aspect of it is most parents don't want their kids to receive their inheritance when they turn 18. They think, 18 is a little bit young for, to come into, $100,000 or $300,000 or more, and that they want to basically have it, have them be able to inherit that a little bit later, when they might be a little bit more mature, be able to think more kind of long-term, in regards to money. And so that's kind of some of the big things with the trust, it's basically dealing with the assets. One thing we haven't talked about yet is basically kind of with the guardianship. And so I talked about the guardianship of the estate, but then there's also what's called the guardianship of the person. And that's basically if your parents pass away and you're a minor, then some adult needs to be appointed by the court to make decisions for that minor. Basically where they live, school, medical, all those things that basically a parent would typically do. And that's something that would be appointed by the court to take on those responsibilities. But it's in your will that you're going to be able to say, to nominate who you want to be that person, to be the guardianship of your children. And so that's some one way to say, this is what I want, and ultimately the court is going to take a lot of deference in looking at that in your wishes, and that's basically kind of how you're going to be able to make those wishes So it's considered after you pass away.
So a couple of things you touched on, and I want to come back to one of the things you talked about is probate. And so I know in California, and I think that things are different at different points across the U.S. So I know you can very clearly speak to the California marketplace, but some of the things to consider. One of the reasons that I know you've mentioned before, it's really important to have the proper estate planning tools in place at the time that you pass away, is so that it doesn't get totally left up to the court in the probate process. And so and then there's also the cost associated with it, where you have wills and trusts in place. The probate process has a lot different costs associated, right?
Yeah, and so generally going through the probate process, oftentimes, and I'm just speaking about California, I can't necessarily talk about the other states. But yeah, you're generally going to be able to save costs in terms of dealing with and avoiding probate here in California, and you're also going to be able to do things on your own time, your own timeline. Like in California, a lot of the counties, you file a petition to start a probate, and before that petition is even heard, you're waiting 2 months, and then to finalize, you're like, oh, I'm all done. Everything's ready for distribution, and you need to get the court order. And so then you file the petition with the court, and yeah, you're going to wait another 2 months before you can actually make that distribution. Whereas having things in a trust, you're going to be able to avoid that kind of those time restraints and say, yeah, we're all done. We're ready to distribute. Let's distribute. And you don't necessarily have to wait for the court to make that happen. And you're also going to be able to save certain costs. And with the trust administration, generally it's going to be, cheaper. I mean, and it all depends on, the complexities of the estate, what's going on. But, generally with a trust, you're going to be able to save, make some savings. And then there was one other thing I wanted to point out. Yeah, so if you don't do anything, then basically state law says who gets what. In California, generally it's going to be, all the community property goes to the spouse. The separate property would be split between the spouse and any children. And then if you don't have a spouse, then basically all of your assets would go equally to your children. The problem there being that, oftentimes there's discussions between, parents and children of, yeah, I'm going to give, this child, this particular house. Everyone else is going to split between everything else. So there's discussions like that. But then if it doesn't get put into writing, then, the law says, yeah, this is what's going to happen. And ultimately, after the fact, all the siblings can say, yeah, we know what, mom wanted, and they can agree to make that happen. But basically, if one of them, doesn't agree, then it could be, a lot more difficult, a big headache for everyone involved, and have the potential of, weakening or, destroying some of those family bonds.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that more than once I've heard of families who really fall apart when there's a loss of a parent, and everyone is just fighting for, themselves, and they lose sight of the family and even what the parents really wanted. But I think one of the other really key points that you made, and I think you made this point early on, but I want to come back to it, is that by putting in place your wills and your trusts and the proper vehicle for your estate, you're in control of what happens afterwards, as opposed to leaving that up to the whims of the state or the laws based on the state that people live in, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I want to step back to another question. So we've talked about these, and I do have a number of folks in my audience who are younger, as well as those who are parents of young adults. And so, it's easy to say, well, I don't have anything. I don't need an estate plan. And so is that true?
Um, I'd say no, and that there's things that they can do, and and it could be, do you need a will that, to say that you want everything to go to your parents? Maybe not. I mean, ultimately, that's what the state law is going to say. If you want it to go to anyone else, your prized, collection or prized, car, then then you're going to need to be able to say who you'd want it to go to. But then there's also other things that you can look at in terms of, when I think of estate planning, I mentioned kind of the incapacity planning, and yeah, it's, for young people, it's not top of mind, because you don't think, nothing's going to happen like that to me. But it's also could be, certain things to, some convenience factors as well, particularly with, with parents, and children. It's something that, you can look at, for a young person, going out to college, and, they, that they've kind of always, they've had some, assistance from their parents. They can basically do things so that, you give, your parents the authority to, have access to medical records, to be able to call the doctor's office, make an appointment for you, and do some of that, with, whether that's with basically a HIPAA release form, or, just making it clear with the doctor's office, and so I look at that as kind of, part of estate planning as well, or it could be with, powers of attorney that, you're away at, college, or you go on a, long extended, trip, for, for some, charitable purpose, down to a, developing country, that, you can give, a parent a, power of attorney to take care of, accounts, pay bills, do different things, for you, so it can make it easier for you. So that's some of the things, kind of for a young person that they could be looking at, in particular. Ultimately, do they need a trust? Probably not. But it's something that they can kind of keep in mind, as they grow older. The other aspect for the younger people is kind of, what do their parents have in place? They can ask them about it. They might have something, and just not talked about it. Some families that are very open and willing to talk about, how things are set up, and other people are more reluctant to talk about it, and it's not so easy of a conversation. But it's something that, they can ask and see what's in place, and and if there isn't, then it might be a good thing to have them get something in place.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and so a couple points I really want to make here, and it's one of those things that I know was a surprise at the point when my kids turned 18, that all of a sudden I wasn't able to talk to the doctor unless I had permission. And a lot of the laws over the years have changed a great deal from even when I was a kid. And so I think your point here is that, times when, even as a young adult, you might want help and support from your parent. If you don't have the right things in place, that doesn't automatically happen for you. And then the other piece is that it's important to make sure that, as a young adult, protect yourself and put yourself in that place where, at the point where you're in a really hard place, you lose a parent, knowing that things are set in place so that their estate's handled in a way that is how your parents want it, and you don't create some of those sibling rivalries and all of the other, that's a very emotional and hard time in general. And so, or you can take out some of the decisions in that whole process and let that be done by the parent. So where you're asking the questions of, hey, mom and dad, do you have a good estate plan in place? Do you have something, a will or a trust, and making sure that's set up? And so that was, that's, I think, another key and important point. And,
Mm.
and I think there's one other group that I know you've mentioned before that really needs to be keenly aware of getting something in place. And you talked a little bit about the I think it was a conservatorship or the governance related to children. And so as young people start growing up and having a family, they are able to either influence who raises their child, or leave it to the fate of the state and the judicial system, right?
Yeah, and so ultimately that they have as a parent, I find that the most difficult decision parents have in creating an estate plan is thinking about and deciding who they want to take care of their children if they pass away. And I think, a lot of people are like, yeah, for the assets, it's this person, they're good with money, they can make good decisions. But then, with the guardianship, there's a little bit more involved. You're looking at kind of who might have the similar values as, as we do, or, maybe have similar personalities, kind of similar, home environment, or, all sorts of different things that you can think about, and in terms of kind of who you'd want to be raising your child. Or you can be thinking of who you don't, want. Some people are like, yeah, I do not want my parents to be raising my child, or, a brother or a sister, and so ultimately, I'd say I think most people want to have their wishes known and followed, and that doing estate planning, whether it's just a simple will, for that that doesn't say a whole lot, but it has that kind of who's going to get everything, and who the guardian is going to be, can be able to express that wish. Ultimately, without, if you don't do anything, then it's basically up to who's going to step up and say, yeah, I'll take care of the kids, and file that petition. And ultimately, if more than one person files for guardianship, then they're going to have to work it out in conjunction with the court to determine who's going to have the guardianship. And ultimately the court's going to be looking at what's in the best interest of the child. And so that's kind of, there's some ultimately uncertainty, that would be there.
Yeah. And so the key there is, at the point in time where things are the hardest, the last thing you want to do is make it even harder on the kids that are left behind. So as young parents, you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up to where, you don't want to expect that that's going to happen, but you just never know when unforeseen things happen and suddenly both parents are gone and you have kids who are left to the court system to figure out where they go. Yeah. So Jeremy, you have shared some awesome information with these folks here. I know you've got an office here in California, but one other thing that I do have folks across the U.S., and so if someone says, okay, I now realize I need an estate plan now, what's some of the ways that they can start looking to get that started? A couple resources, I know you mentioned one a little bit ago, but also, are there some questions that they might ask as they're starting to get started? Every state is different, so whether you need a will or a trust or both, or all of those things are going to be varying by state. And so one key is making sure they understand the laws in the state that they're involved with. But beyond that, finding someone to help them get started.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to, a good place to start is, if you know someone that has met with an attorney for estate planning and they've had a good experience, yeah, you can, talk with that person about, that attorney, what their experience was like. And, you can kind of just do your search, or, around town. Ultimately, you're going to want to find somebody that you feel comfortable with, that you can feel like you can trust that they'll do a good job. There's some that, some attorneys might be a general practitioner, kind of do a little bit of everything, or it could be, someone that focuses primarily on estate planning and trust and estate administration. Another place that you can look is estateplanning.com. It's basically a place where you can learn more about estate planning, but also find an estate planner that might be near you. And it's put together through a company called Wealth Counsel that has thousands of attorneys across the nation involved with it.
Excellent. All right. And then the last thing is that, maybe there's someone here in California and they say, okay, I know I need to do something. So Jeremy, you want to go ahead? What's the easiest way for them to get in touch with you? And maybe they have some specific example questions that they want to narrow in on and realize that they need to get started themselves. So how can they best reach you?
I mean, they can reach me by email or phone. Basically, my email is Jeremy, Jeremy, at jeremypricelaw.com. And then my website is similar. It's just jeremypricelaw.com, and be able to find me there, and just reach out to me and be able to answer any questions and see if I can help you.
All right, excellent. Well, Jeremy, I really appreciate you being here and helping to educate these guys on some of the vehicles, a little bit about an estate. An estate is not all around assets. I don't consider children an asset, and they're a key and important part of the estate plan. And so, I know that you've given some great information. Really appreciate your being here, and I will talk with you again soon as well.
Sounds good. Thank you, Arlene.
Thanks.